Hello, my name is Melanie Kim, and I am the author of Oil Paper Family, a book about the life story of my grandfather, Yoon Bum Kim. It follows his childhood in rural North Korea in the 1930s on a farm, his experience beneath 3 oppressive regimes in Korea, and his eventual escape south during the Korean War. In this book, you will meet him, his mother, his father, and his 6 siblings. I've loved writing and hearing stories from a young age, and growing up, my grandfather always told me stories about his childhood. They were lighthearted and fun, stories about catching dragonflies after new rainfall, gathering wild vegetables in the mountain to help out his mom, building his own handmade sled to sled down the mountainside and scraping up his hands and his knees, taking care of his younger sister, mimicking the sound of cicadas in the trees with the other village children. But as I grew older, he started to tell me about the more difficult and painful memories that he had. What it was really like to live beneath Japanese imperialism, especially in the education setting. What it was like to leave behind his entire family when he fled south. Stories about near-death experiences, what war looked like firsthand, his internal turmoil. I was inspired to write this book because of the way my grandfather looked when he talked about these stories. There was regret and pain and sorrow and even guilt on his face, but there was also peace and there was joy in being able to pass on these stories to his children and his grandchildren, which is one of the reasons why I started a more in-depth interviewing of my grandfather to hear more about the complexities of his life story and what I would eventually create into a narrative in this book. I see my grandfather's experience as unique because of how he ended up eventually as a prominent immunologist in the years after he escaped from North Korea. And though I know that this time period was defined by a lot of grief and family separation, I feel that each person has a special experience of the way that they dealt with these emotions and these complex experiences. And my grandfather also bore the guilt of leaving behind his entire family for a mistake that he felt was his own. So this book explores that kind of difficult and complex experience. And I hope that this book can highlight the individual experience within the context of such sweeping events in Korean history, a period of time that I really had no knowledge of until I began and undertook this project. So I hope that along with me that you can learn about this broader context of history. But most of all, I really want people to be able to learn about the individual experiences of the older generation who lived through these events, who lived through Japanese imperialism, the effects of World War II on Korea, the Korean War, communist rule, the Soviet occupation. Knowing my grandfather's story and the kinds of horrible struggles and pain that he had to face, and yet seeing that the man that he has become and is has been such an eye-opening experience. My grandfather smiles often. He laughs. He fondly remembers his mom and his siblings and a life that he loved in North Korea despite its pain. And I think that it's something that's really worth telling. A kind of story that's not just Korean, but is a story of humanity and resiliency and strength. And it speaks to the power of finding joy in the midst of pain and struggle. And a powerful story that I share in this book is actually the inspiration behind my book's title, Oil Paper Family. When my grandfather fled south, his family gathered all the money that they had and they passed it on to him and blessed him with a safe journey. My grandfather kept that money in a pouch against his body for months as he escaped south and eventually tried to make his way in the city down south. But he vowed that he would never spend this money until he was reunited with his family. It wasn't until months later when he opened up this pouch and saw that the money had been reduced to literal oil paper from his sweat and body oil over the past few months. My grandfather was in tears when he was telling me this story. And I felt like it was such a powerful and fitting title for his life story. My hope for this book is that it makes you pause and think a little. I hope that it leads to conversations with family members and loved ones, and maybe just a little more empathy for the stranger on the street whose story that you may never know about. And I think that you will love this book if you're interested in human resiliency or about learning about an underrepresented part of history. And if you're a third-generation Korean American like me, I hope that it lets you explore your heritage a little. And for everyone, I hope that it just lets you see the experience of an older generation and what that looked like. My name is Melanie Kim, and this is Oil Paper Family.